Well, I'm sorry for the technical problems which we've had in the past few minutes. Hopefully we're back online, and we were looking at the game Bogner-Jablonitsky from the match Switzerland against Slovakia 2. We had this King's Indian position, and it's a position in which white is better, and Bogner is also a stronger, more experienced player, so let's see how he deals with this. G3, this is directed against knight f4, and if black plays f5, then the knight on h5 will be hanging if he wants to take back with the pawn on f5. So this is a problem. White of course can play something like knight takes e5, f5, g f5, ef5, gf5, knight e5. So black returns back. He has freed the h3 square for his bishop, but after bishop d2 he still has to play h6, because otherwise white would play knight g5 to chase away the bishop. And now white played knight h4. It's not so simple for black to get in f5 advantageously. Knight e8, queen c2. Now he did play f5, and the thing is that after taking on f5, white simply plays maybe king h1 is a strong move. Black has no way to improve his position, and it's on white if he's going to push f4 or bishop d3, trying to force the pawns to move. Once black moves his pawn to e4, white is ready to break up the pawn chain. So black's position is seemingly active, but the pawns in reality are quite exposed. So even gf5, king h1 gives white an advantage. Jablonitsky tried to solve it differently with piece play. He played g5, but okay, after a couple of exchanges, now white gets the e4 square for his knight, and this gives him a very pleasant advantage, a strategic advantage. Because black doesn't have any pawn phalanx on the king side, he doesn't have a chance to start the pawn attack, okay, this he tries to keep his light squared bishop, but this also leads to problems on the diagonal b1 h7, f3, simply limiting the knight d7, and now white played knight d4, and this is the consequence of white's rook on a3. The rook on a3 controls the f3 square, so black returned with the knight. White has a pleasant advantage. He may even consider playing g4, locking in the bishop on h3, and black's chances to create some play on the king side are very small. I mean, he's with his back against the wall in this position. White is substantially better. Okay, let's get on to board 2, where Turchan is playing with white against Peng. What kind of opening is this? It's the open Ruy Lopez. We've already had this in one of our games today. c3, and we saw the system with bishop e7. Bishop c5 is a more active move. It's quite popular, but it has the drawback that, as I mentioned, the backward c pawn, it's more difficult for black to get in the c5 advance. Here he relies on he relies on the greater activity of his pieces. The standard move here is bishop c2, and then black sacrifices. He takes on f2, knight takes f2, rook takes f2, f6. This is quite a popular line. Recently white has found some ways to prove an advantage here. Turchan didn't want this. Turchan was not so interested, so he played queen e2 instead. Now taking on f2 doesn't make sense. and he's fighting against the knight on e4. So he tries to force black to exchange the knight, but black insists. Black wants to keep the knight in on the central square, and white takes anyway. D takes e4. Now, okay, e6 leads to some interesting complications. White played it simply, but this shouldn't really give him an advantage. Bishop g4. Oh, this is if black retreats if black plays something like bishop b6, then of course knight g3 could be a problem. Attacking two minor pieces at once, black would have to at least play queen f6 and give the bishop pair. So I can first attack the queen, and of course white can't play f3 because the pawn is pinned, and black's pieces are slightly more active. What happened in the game is queen d2, and now black can exchange queens and play bishop b6, or maybe he can play bishop b6 immediately. And black is fine. Black has definitely solved his opening problems, and instead it's white already who has to treat with care, so to say. I mean, he is already not fighting for an advantage, but to keep the balance. So let's check board 3. Here Benziger is playing white against Bango, and this is a Marozzi set up in the Sicilian. So he played an accelerated dragon, which allows the Marozzi setup, and Benziger took up the challenge. He occupies the center. So this is a pawn and piece center with the knight on d4 and the pawns on c4, e4, cramping white's position. It has been a dangerous weapon, but Bango played it yesterday and he won against his Hungarian opponent with this system queen b6. So he decides to repeat it. Here the players repeated moves for a while, and now white played queen d2. Knight f6, knight c3, castles, and bishop e2. We had something similar here, and now a5, h3, a4. Well, it's a typical Marozzi position. White is slightly better here, but black's position is rather solid, so it still remains to be seen how he can improve his position, how he can convert his space advantage into something more significant. b4, okay, black takes, bishop c6. This allows a further exchange of the dark squared bishops. And black simply played b6. I'm thinking about something like queen b6, but queen b6 is just b5. The bishop is trapped. My queen is not attacked on e3. So b6 is more or less forced. White increases his space advantage. And black tries to fight back. Queen c7, rook c1, and now he played e5. So this is one of the drawbacks of this setup. Once the dark squared bishops are exchanged, then white's bishop on e2 is limited by his own pawns on c4 and e4. Still, I think after some move like queen d3 or so, and after e takes f4, rook d1, well, black will have to do something with the d6 pawn. So white still retains some advantage, but okay, black is not without counterplay. On the last board we have Vtachnik playing against Kurman, and they're playing also an English opening, symmetrical English, but a sharp fighting line with d5, cd5, knight d5. Okay, here the way to simplify the position is to play d4, cd4, knight d4, then black plays knight b4, But this is symmetrical and rather equal. So knight c3 is a more ambitious try. But here black himself wants to play this Marozzi setup. He intends to play e5 and then proceed to consolidate his position and get a space advantage. White plays the most usual reaction with castles on d3. Actually, I think that currently a topical move is a3, preparing b4, which is interesting. Black usually reacts with g6 and then white can play h4. Once again trying to advance the h-pawn, as we've already mentioned in one of the previous broadcasts, that this is currently very fashionable to advance the rook pawn. Okay, castles, e5, d3 is a normal line. Now after knight d2, black must consider bishop takes c6, breaking up the queen side, giving up the fianchettoed bishop, but creating really serious weaknesses on the queen side. Bishop d7 is the most usual move. Knight c4. Now if black doesn't want to sacrifice a pawn with castles, bishop c6, bishop c6, knight e5, black plays then bishop e8. Yes, the bishop pair and some compensation, but okay, it's quite committal, of course, to sacrifice a central pawn. So he plays f6 instead. And this is a tested way to play against the Marozzi setup. White tries to undermine black's central pawns from the flank. I've already mentioned a3 with the idea b4 earlier. Here he goes for the e5 pawn by preparing f4. b5, knight e3 takes. Now white has more than one option here. He can play knight d5 is interesting, knight f5 is also interesting, and Evtachnik played the simplest move, g takes f4. And black castled. And after bishop d2 he played f5 himself, which denies white the e4 square. Otherwise white could have tried to play e5, f5 and get better control over the e4 d5 squares. Rook c1 was the follow-up. Well, the position is unclear, but basically black shouldn't be too dissatisfied. I mean, he has managed to finish his development. Okay, white has some piece play, but black's pieces are also quite active. Now logical reaction is something like rook b8, rook c8, unpinning the c6 knight, which is ready to hop to d4. White's knight can come to d5 as well, but it's not really increasing the pressure on black's position. After knight d5 I can simply take. Knight takes d5, I retreat with the bishop to d6, and already supporting the knight with e4 is double-edged, because this can also result in... So this is something which should not be undertaken lightly, playing e to e4. So after rook c8, black is doing fine in this position. So let's go on to the following match, which is Hungary, Italy against Hungary. And the Italian Grandmaster Sonis is on board 1, playing against Bodrogi, and they have also this Berlin. White plays the anti-Berlin, and we had this game by Neugebauer in one match where black played d6, and I mentioned that bishop c5 is the most popular move. So here we have the most topical line in this d3 anti-Berlin. White took on c6. Other alternatives are castles or c3 to stop knight d4. c3 is played slightly more often than bishop takes c6. But here, giving up the bishop makes sense. Black can't really take with the b pawn because e5 is hanging. After d takes c6, knight e5 naturally runs into queen d4. This is not very good. It's just it's not losing a piece, but it does lose at least a pawn, I think, and Definitely something which should be avoided. And the bishop pair is compensated by black's compromised pawn structure. White continues knight bd2. This is the most popular move. White doesn't castle yet, and he will not castle also for the following few moves, leaving both options open. Either kingside or queenside castling. Even there is even the option of keeping the king in the center, because with d3 e4 white center is really solid. Bishop e6. Other moves are castles or knight d7. Black also doesn't castle yet. He still tries to be flexible, and he's awaiting further development, and according to what happens, he will then choose choose where to safeguard his king. He can also castle queenside, both queenside and kingside at this point. Queen e2. Okay, now the e5 pawn is attacked already, because queen f2 is protected, queen d4 is just nothing. So black played knight d7. Standard move here is knight b3. And if the bishop goes to b6, then white can play knight g5. Well, there is a line like this. I think it's a slightly different. There, white is castled instead of playing queen e2. I think black is doing fine there, although he has to give up the bishop pair. He will then take on b3, and white also has a double pawn on the queen side, so one can't say that white has a decidedly superior pawn structure. But Sonny's played something else. He played h4, and this indicates he's probably going to either castle queenside or just slide the king over, play some artificial castling, something like king f1, g3, king g2 or so. And he tries to grab space on the king side. Okay, knight g5 is the idea, so black prevents this. Now h5. Queen e7. And now he starts transferring the other knight to d2. I'm not too impressed. I mean, more logical is something like a3, b3, and then bishop b2, maybe, or maybe knight, maybe knight b3 after all, and after bishop b6 I can play bishop e3. But okay, he played bishop d6, which is of course also possible. Now bishop e3, black is going to play a5, followed by a4. I don't know if really white wants to play a4 himself here, leaving the b4 square open for the black pieces. So knight fd2. Anyway, a5, knight c4, and now a4. And this is the position we have here. Well, I quite like black's position actually. If he takes on d6, black's pawn structure is not ruined anymore. I mean, I'll get rid of the doubled pawn, and have some extra space on the queen side, while white's attacking chances on the king side. I mean, black hasn't even castled yet, and even if he castles, black will have counterplay in the center. White didn't take on d6, and now black can either play b5, forcing knight d6, or he can keep the bishop alive. He can continue bishop c5. And you see, black's setup is more harmonious. His piece, he has some space on the queen side. His pieces are working well together. White hasn't even won the bishop pair, so black is doing fine here. Certainly Sonnis didn't get anything from the opening to be too proud about, bearing in mind that he's playing white. Okay, on board 2 we have Pastor playing with Moroni, and here we have the 4 knights game, and white played knight d5. the so-called Belgrade gambit. So now if knight takes e4, then white plays d4. This is some sort of maybe complicated theory. Knight takes d5 is maybe possible as well. I don't know too much about this line. Knight takes e4 is the principled answer in any case. Moroni, who's a favorite in this game, played the rather strange move, bishop d6. Okay, it should be playable as well, but it's definitely not too standard. As I said in transmission yesterday, I think it's not really typical to put minor pieces in front of central pawns, because this complicates your development. Well, let's see what happened. d3, this. They played it quite originally now. Knight d7. I don't know if d3 is the best move. I'm not so sure. And white is trying to open up the position. d4. If e4, then knight d2, knight d5, knight d4. Bishop retreats to e7. Looks pretty much playable for black, but white has maybe a slight advantage after some c3 and bishop d3. The knight will have to vacate d5 for black to play d5 himself. So, and this costs some time. So he played knight g6 instead. Which is actually, shouldn't be ideal, and here h4 looks promising. h4, h5. Black is not too thrilled about playing something like h5 himself. So this really deserves attention, and bishop d3 is maybe too soft. e d4, castles, castles, knight g5. He's going for a quick kill here. And for example, after h6, what's going to happen after h6? White can take on f7 maybe and play queen h5. Is that possible? Or queen h5 immediately to create some complications, and then I might be able to take on f7. Well, not so sure about it. But queen h5 is possible, because after hg5, bishop g5, queen e8, then the rook comes to e1. This looks very dangerous for black. So, but he played a safer move. h6 is risky, and what happened in reality is bishop e7. Well, now queen h5 is consistent. Queen h5, bishop g5, bishop g5, f6, and then I retreat somewhere with the bishop, maybe to d2, maybe even to h4. White wants to take on g6. Also, the d4 pawn is not there forever, so White will probably win the pawn back. And if he does so, he can come out of the opening with a slight advantage. Queen h5 actually happened, and now we are waiting for for white to take back. Well, I'm pretty sure he'll take with the bishop, which is the most natural answer. Okay, let's continue on to board 3. Yes, this happened while we were talking. This happened, and we are waiting for black. Well, f6 is a very natural move, and black also played f6 quite quickly. On board 3 we have Brunello playing with white against Balzert, and they also played something like it transposed into the Panov attack of the Caro-Kann. Knight c6, knight c3, and now the usual move here is bishop g4. Bishop g4, c takes d5, knight takes d5, queen b3, bishop f3, gf3. This is a long line in which black should be doing fine. He has to know some of the theory, but in principle the theoretical standing of bishop g4 is okay. Balzert played a6 instead. I think I've seen this move being played. I don't think it's an improvement over bishop g4. It would be very surprising. I don't know, maybe, but in reality, if white plays c5, then a6 makes sense because black can play b6 without too many worries. There is nothing like, there is no bishop b5, no knight bin. So white prefers to develop his pieces. So what happened is bishop e3. And black plays g6. Black's idea is simply to finish his kingside development. So we have this position after 8 moves. Well, taking on c6, then on d5. I think black is doing quite fine because white needs 2 moves to finish his development. Bishop e2, castles, castles, and then black can take on c4. And he has a sound pawn structure. Okay, he can have, after knight takes c6, he can have some weaknesses on queenside, but also the d4 pawn will be weak. So here black's counterplay is definitely not worse. And the last game on board 4 is Juhas against Lumaci. Here everything is still on board except one pair of rooks. So let's play through the moves quickly. Black doesn't want to play the Ruy Lopez. He insists on playing maybe strange version of the Pirt's defense, where he has already committed his knight to c6. Bishop e2, h3, d5. If white wants to fight for an advantage, this is better. Castling e5 is rather equal. This is not the King's Indian here. White's knight is on c3 and white's pawn is on c2, which means that after e5, d5, black goes with the knight to e7, white can't develop his play on the queen side. He would need to have the pawn on c4 to do that. So here after castles e5, already white's advantage is probably gone because d takes an exchange on e5 isn't going to be dangerous for black. So d5, knight b8, castles, okay, and black looks, black's counterplay is directed against the center. He tries to undermine this d5 pawn. One possibility is c6, and he played the other move actually, he played e6. White doesn't take on e6. I mean, he develops his bishop and says, okay, you take me first. Well, it kicks the bishop away and white goes to e3, hoping to win a tempo with queen d2. So this even happened. King takes, and now king h7, rook e1. White is better developed. Well, he has at least a slight advantage here because he has more space, and the problem is that there are too many pieces, too many minor pieces. Not a single piece has been exchanged, and black, who lacks space, he has also less good squares for his pieces. This is the problem with the space disadvantage. So white simply maneuvers. Okay, he will exchange one pair of rooks, but black is still under some pressure here. He tries to free himself with c6. He even accepts an isolated pawn. Well, d takes c6 looks pretty much logical, but what happened is bishop c4. Now, black could have played, and maybe should have played, knight e4 to simplify the position a bit. I mean, when you're defending a slightly worse position, exchanging some pieces is always welcome. But he played a6 instead. He wants to do something like knight a4, but he's worried about his a7 pawn in the future. So he removes it from a7. Rook e1 and now knight e4. And this is the position we have on the board. Well, white is maybe a little bit better. I can take on e4, then play queen f4. But black can chase the queen away with g5, and the queen must go all the way back to c1. So I suppose this is quite playable for black. If white has an advantage, it's not too big. I think we've already seen all the men's games, so let's have a look at the ladies, which we haven't had in the translation and in the transmission yet. And we have middle games, and there's quite a lot going on here. So the Swiss ladies are leading the tournament. They've won 6 matches and drawn 1. They have 13 points, and the teams in place 2 and 3 have 10 points. If the Swiss team wins today, they have won the Mitropa already. They will have a guaranteed first place before the last round. So let's check if this is on the cards. We have Manko here playing with white against Mirjana Medic. So we have here a Catalan, popular opening we've already had, a5. We had the system in the game Finek against Pechac, and exactly the same moves happened there. Knight f3 here. I think here Pechac took e takes d5 at this point, and Medic plays c d4 and queen b6, which is also one of the main lines. e3 is standard here. e3, ed5, castles, knight c6. It's very similar then to Pechac's game. In fact, it maybe transposes into it. Manko played something different. She played knight f3. E takes d5, and now castles. Knight c3, and she develops her knight to a more active square, not to d2. Well, given a chance, white would play bishop g5, so black prevents this with h6. Now bishop e3 seems possible because d4 runs into knight a4. Or maybe even knight takes d4 and I pin the knight. I don't know. Knight a4 is solid. Black will have problems with this pawn, but Manko played queen d3, allowing black to play d4. Rook fc1 is what happened. And now black should have taken on d2. Simply release the tension, and well, depending on how white takes. If takes with the knight, then I have knight b4. If she takes with the queen, I can play simply something like rook e8, let's say, or knight e4, queen f4, rook e8. Black has this isolated pawn on d4, but this active piece play compensates this drawback. So black should look at dynamic continuations to compensate for the deficiencies in this pawn structure. And in this sense, this is perhaps not ideal. Bishop e6, bishop b4, and if now black takes with the pawn, then white has knight c5, which is advantageous for white. Knight c5, I'm hitting the bishop on e6, and I'm also threatening to take on d4. So here possibly the best thing to do is bishop d5, but this gives white a pawn. Even if you somehow manage to win the pawn on a2, it's still not going to solve your problems. And this is also what happened in the game. She took with the knight, and this gains back the a2 pawn, but white has one central pawn, and the central pawn is definitely more important. And now white is thinking. Knight d4, maybe even rook c5, There's more than one move which gives white the initiative. White is better here with a pleasant and a rather riskless position. Okay, let's go to board 2. Here we have the line which we have mentioned in the Panov attack. This is what I've said here, bishop g4 instead of a6 in the men's game, in the game from the match Switzerland, I don't know, it's Hungarian was involved in this. And black didn't play a6, played bishop g4. And c d5, bishop, knight d5, queen b3, takes, e6. This is all standard theory. Queen c6, king e7. Now, of course, the main move is queen takes b5. Then black usually plays queen d7, and it leads to a position which is considered equal. But this is a new wrinkle, the piece sacrifice. Now black can save his knight. He can play knight d6. This is actually what happened after queen d6. I'm going to take on d5 and play queen takes b5, and this is advantageous for white. But how is it with the piece sacrifice? White castled. Black played queen b6. This has been played already. I have no idea what the evaluation of the position is. It's possibly just equal. Well, black is a piece up, but he has lost his right to castle, so the king remains in the middle, and white has a long-term initiative. But is it enough for a piece? Queen f5, rook d8, takes, rook d1, bishop e7. And now after something like rook d7, well, I can possibly simply take on f3. The whole question remains if black manages to untangle his forces here. Rook d7, that's pretty natural move, but I don't know what's the big idea after queen takes f3. Computer suggests that black should simply take the pawn, and gives black an advantage because long term white can hardly prevent some g6, king g7, or g6, h5, h4, rook h5. The rook is sleeping on h8 at this point, but white has only 3 pieces, and to increase the pressure to such an extent that black won't be able to activate his rook, well, that's open a question if it's possible. I would rather say that with good defense, black should be able to defend this position. But okay, chess is a game of risk and chance. Black has a half an hour less on the clock, so the result will be decided maybe in time trouble. On board 3 we have Hakimifar, the Iranese player who is playing for Switzerland, against Tihana Ivekovic, and this is some Rui Lopez, a popular line, rather popular nowadays, knight ge7, the so-called Cozio. And after castling, earlier black used to play g6, bishop g7, now the trend is different, and he prefers knight g6. Knight is solid on g6, so bishop c6 is not too dangerous because the e5 is protected, and black is free to develop his bishop to a more active square than g7. After d4, what happened in the game? Well, black took and played simply bishop c5. Knight f5 castles. Knight c3. And here da6. I don't know if a6... I would try to fight this knight on f5. I would try to play something like knight e7 at some point. But okay. a6 is playable. Now knight e5 maybe, d6, queen h5. king h8, knight d5. This looks active, dangerous, but it's not so impressive. I mean, black is still pretty solid. Next move can be knight e7, b4. While try, it's not so clear to me why black shouldn't be able to take the pawn on b4. I don't see any immediate refutation. So it's rather a gamble. Black was afraid, she chose bishop a7, and I think this is a concession. When offered a pawn, you should consider taking it primarily, and here I really don't see what's the idea behind b4. After bishop a7, white played rook b1. White is better, and here the idea between the idea of b4 is already clear. I mean, not only I want to put my bishop to b2, which is most obvious, but a more hidden idea is to play rook b3, rook h3. A rook lift to the king side. After rook b3, white already threatens not only rook a3 but also queen takes g6, rook a3 check, and then after king g8 discover check with mate on f6 or e7. Well, here white is better here. Black must defend with care. Board 4. We have Kundula Hainats, and white is Anna Maria Radikovic, and Radikovic decided to play the Reti opening with simply knight f3, g3, d5, and now she ignores the center. She doesn't go for some Catalan, she just develops her king side, and after g6, no d4, d3. And the plan is to prepare the e4 push. c3, knight bd2, a5. Well, she didn't want to allow a4, obviously, so she played a4 herself, and black develops knight to a6. Okay, it's possible. Rook d1, e5, e4. Now it seems strange to me that black should decide to release the central tension. Hainats played d4. I don't like this move so much. Well, it's more reasonable to proceed with development. I mean, queen c7, then bishop d7, rook d8, coordinate the pieces, and then only decide what's going to happen in the center. See, this apart from other things, this allows white to play knight c4, and now if you play knight d7, I can get the bishop pair with knight d6, and but the same goes for bishop g4. Well, white played h3. I don't quite understand why I can't take with the c knight on e5. Knight c e5, rook e5, knight e5, bishop d1, queen d1. Knight takes e4. Knight takes c6. If we play Desperado chess, white is also able to take quite a few pawns, and this seems very much advantageous for white. Radikovic played h3, which is also okay. I mean, black is forced to give up the bishop pair, and now potentially the f3 bishop, which has no opponent, can bring white an advantage. Knight c5 is what happened. And white played bishop, white played cd4. Well, why hurry so much? Now black could have played knight e6, and this is unpleasant because I'm going to land my knight on d4 or piece, because white can't retain the extra pawn. If he takes on e5, knight d4 is a fork, and next move is knight takes f3. This loses a piece. So knight e6 was definitely the way to go, which I think both players overlooked this, I suppose, because otherwise here white would have continued calmly, perhaps bishop g2. So this takes the bishop out of the way of this knight d4 fork, and after bishop g2 I already want to take on d4. If black takes with the queen, then I have bishop e3, I push in the center with d4, this would be advantageous. So let's just make this move. It's not so simple because knight e6 is knight takes e5. And otherwise I want to take on d4. This is advantageous for white. cd4 shouldn't have been so good after knight e6, but black mechanically just took back with the pawn. And okay, this is pleasant for white. Bishop f4. Both bishops are active. Bishop d2 is also a good move actually, with the idea knight takes a5, rook a5, b4, opening up the queen side. Knight d7, and this is the position on the board. So what can white do here? Okay, the engine suggestion is h4, as always. Advance your h-pawn when you're in doubt. What's a human suggestion? Human suggestion would be perhaps bishop g2. But instead of bishop f4, I think white could have rather played bishop g2 one move earlier, and then he gets a chance also to advance the f-pawn. Now both bishops are in the way of the f-pawn. White is better, but still black has chances, of course, to resist, so it's still an open game. Let's go on to the match between Hungary and Italy. Hungary is one of the teams which has 10 points, together with France, I think, and the Italian team have 8 points. They are in 4th place, which is a little bit of a disappointment. I mean, they were seeded in 2nd place. They were supposed to be the main competitors of the Swiss team, but they're lagging behind. They have lost already 3 matches. So Hungary, Italy, Hungary, and the game Brunello against Terbe. This is Petrov. Modern line today, where black actually plays what has long been considered a mistake. Here the standard move is d6, knight f3, knight e4, etc, etc. Theory goes on for dozens of moves. Knight e4. After queen e2, black's knight can't retreat. Black is going to lose a piece, his queen then, but the idea is to play queen e7, queen e4, d6. And I'm winning the piece back, and if white manages to retain an extra pawn, I'm going to win that pawn back too. So d4 happened, d5, d5, knight c6. I think Brunello knew something about this line because she played the best reaction. She played knight c3. f4, f6, I don't think there is any advantage for white in this. Or maybe what does black play here? I don't know the theory so well. Bishop g4 is also unpleasant because it practically prevents queenside castling by controlling the d1 square. And black wants to castle himself. At some point, black also has queen b4 check. I can enter the endgame with a lead in development. Bishop g4 gives white compensation. So this has to be the main try, knight c3, to fight for an advantage. Okay, black exchanges queens, and now white gains some tempi by harassing black's pieces. Bishop g3, and the idea is to play knight e4 or knight b5. I mean, if you do it immediately, black has simply knight f3 check and takes on f4. h5, and castle simply. Okay, bishop e5 is a threat. h4, bishop e5 wins a piece, so he can't do this. So what happened is f6. h4. Bishop d7, and now knight b5. White is going to win the bishop pair. But Still, black's position is pretty solid because the pawn structure is symmetrical, and this means the bishops are stronger in open positions with non-symmetrical structure, and the symmetrical structure increases the chances for successful defense. So Brunello pushed on with b4, with f4, which is a double-edged move because it gives the knight an outpost. The way to fight against the bishop pair with knights is to find fortified outposts for the knight, and this is the case here. Knight g4, bishop c4. Okay, black doesn't want to go to g6, which would allow white actually to play f5. Maybe it's the best chance to go for an advantage, so she prefers king f8, hoping for g6, king g7 simply. Rook e1, rook e8. Okay, this is quite solid. Bishop d5, b6, check, king f7, rook d4. I don't think, well, black can play a g5 here. Why not? I mean, she has the knight on g4. She can follow up with some active kingside play. What is white's idea here? To play a rook a4? Well, that's just a5, or something like b4, b5, and then rook a4 attacking the a7 pawn. That seems rather slow. So here g5 definitely gives black sufficient counter chances. On board 2 we have Terbe, the second Terbe sister, Zuzana. Julia is on board 1, and Zuzana on board 2 has white against Zimina, and they played Benoni, King's Indian line. Well, we'll see. The structure is certainly Benoni, but it started as a King's Indian. And here h3. Okay, h3 is a strategic line. Anyway, the standard, most usual reaction here is e5. But also c5 has been played many times, and this is supposed to be okay for white. Rook e8, although the position is symmetrical, I play bishop e3. This is even a pawn sacrifice. I'm willing to give the pawn. Rook e3, queen d2, then queen goes to h6, knight comes to g5. This is dangerous. So mostly black defends with knight bd7. It seems as, okay, black has a better bishop, controls the dark squares, but white has a lead in development. And with the open f-file, he can create some threats. So this is considered, here black must defend with care. Queen d2, queen e7, e4. And after knight e5, for example, okay, I would like to have my knight on e5, but if black plays knight e5, his queen is going to land on e5, and I can take and play queen f4, even exchanging queens. Takes, black plays something like king g7, rook f1. Well, he has big problems on the f-file. If he moves his knight away, then knight b5 comes, attacking d6 and threatening with a fork on c7. So black played prophylactic move, king g7, rook f2, and now a6 prevents these knight b5 ideas. Rook a f1. But white has double on the f-file, and black is not able to play knight e5 anymore. So rook f8 is what happened. And now, to activate the pieces, e5 is a dangerous push. Black can't take with the knight, must take with the pawn, then white plays knight g5. All white's pieces are aiming on black's king, and this is pretty much dangerous. I mean, this is really a nasty position for black. All these tactical chances, I can transfer my queen via e3 to g3. There is also something like knight e4, then d6, d6, queen takes d6, knight d5, increasing the pressure on the f-file. well, black faces a really difficult defense. Okay, let's play some logical move. Let's play this. Bishop takes g6 is a computer move. F takes g6 is a fork on e6. King takes g6. I proceed with rook f5. I mean, white does have 6 pieces, and they're all trained on black's king, while black's rook on a8 and bishop on c8 are finding it very difficult to join the game. So here black is in danger of losing really quickly. g4 is less impressive, because it allows black, suddenly the white's advantage is smaller. It allows black to move back the knight from the f file, and if necessary I can solidify the position with something like f6. Knight e2, white starts maneuvering, and black tries to get some counterplay on the queen side with b5. White is still better here, but already black has improved her position, and the fight is on. So let's pass on to board 3. Lena Sedina is playing with white against Dorina Demeter. Sedina has an excellent result here. She's really the motor of the Italian team. Both Simina and Brunello are not doing too well, but Sedina is making up for this. So what happened here? The bishop game. Knight f6, d3, and black played c6. So it's not going to be the Italian after knight c6, knight f3, bishop c5, but it's original bishop game. Knight f3, bishop e7. Okay, this is playable. Knight takes e5. There is a check on a5, winning the knight. But nowadays, currently the best move is occupying the center with d5. d5, bishop b3, and then bishop d6 or a5 first. Black has had good results recently with this, while bishop e7, which was considered very good, but longer ago. Here we have something like the Italian game. Only the knight won't get to c6 on to d7, and in the maneuvering struggle, still white has at least a slight initiative. So let's follow up what happened. Castles, bishop b3, knight d7, c3 to free c2 for the bishop. After knight c5, white doesn't want to give up the light squared bishop, and black played d5 only now, which cost him tempi. Okay, white attacks indirectly the e5 pawn. The threat is to take on the e5. Bishop d6, knight f1. White simply develops her pieces as in a Roy Lopez. Queen c7. Now white decided to open the position. This shouldn't be sufficient for an advantage. I mean, you can continue maneuvering, or you can play something like knight f5, maybe, trying to improve white's position. d4, e takes d4 is what happened. E d5. Okay, white did get black an isolated pawn, but black has 2 bishops. Some move like a bishop f8, let's say, and then I proceed with knight f6, put the bishop to d7, rook to e8. Well, the d5 weakness is the pawn is not so vulnerable currently. White has no way to attack it directly, and black should be able to hold the balance. Position looks very much equal. And on board 4 we have Lily Toth with white playing against Shvedova. Shvedova also had a good result, but I think 2 days ago she lost the game. And in this game she's defending with black, and we have the Italian game here. the gioco piano as it is played nowadays. Knight c3. Oh, okay, this is not so typical. A more usual setup is with c3, and the knight then heads for d2, or maybe to a3 after a4, knight a3. But knight c3, this symmetrical line, there's also white has some tricks here. I mean, it used to be played with the idea to play bishop g5, then take on f6, knight d5, c3, d4. Giving up the bishop is not too popular nowadays. So the main idea after d6 is to play knight a4, winning black's bishop on the other hand. So black tries to prevent this with a6. Now knight a4, bishop a7 of course doesn't make much sense. And given a chance, black would play h6 himself to prevent even the bishop g5 pin. But white played bishop e3 instead. Well, taking on e3 doubles white's pawns, but gives white chances on the open f-file. When I was a kid, I considered bishop e3, fe3 fantastic for white. I mean, f-file, attacking chances. Okay, nowadays I know a little bit more about chess. I know that this also has its drawbacks. After all, white has a double pawn, and the flexibility of his pawn structure has been diminished by this. But black is willing to accept a double pawn himself, or herself to be exact. Bishop c5, dc5. Now a6 served to prevent white from playing some bishop b5, which would be rather nasty at this point. And black says, okay, I have double pawns, but I have the d file, I have control of the center. Where are you going to play? How are you going to develop your play? a4, h6, h3, and black proceeds with her development. Bishop d7, knight d3, g6, bishop e6, and now black even castled queen side. Of course, this leads to a sharp struggle, but I think black's pieces are so well placed that she is fighting for an advantage now. Well, the d3 pawn is hanging, so bishop c2, black, knight h5 is a logical follow-up. To prepare f5, to prepare knight f4. This looks very attractive for black, knight h5. It didn't happen in the game. In the game, black played queen e7 first, creating the threat knight takes e4. But okay, white plays queen e2, now knight h5. I think this version is slightly worse. g3. Definitely not letting the knight to f4, queen d7. My pawn is attacked on h3, and white ignores it. Why is she able to ignore the pawn? What happens after bishop takes h3? Bishop a4 is rather nasty. And then I'm going to take on, I'm threatening to take on e5, and I'm going to take on c6 and double black's pawns. So it's not worth it. Black's queen side will be weakened. But already here, black's main plan here should be, okay, with this doubled pawns, she should play for activity. And now f5 doesn't work so well. After f5, white plays something like knight h4. So at least I think so. Or bishop, or once again, this bishop a4 is a problem. So she has to do, after a5, she has to do something against this. She played f6, and already the initiative is passed to white. I can go knight d2, transfer my knight to c4, then I will quietly move my king over to g2. Knight h4 is what happened, queen f7, and she wants to improve the king, so king g2. This, on the other hand, seems slow. I have indicated what black wants to play. Black wants to play f5. Well, why not? I think I can play f5 here, and not only can, I should do it, because otherwise, if white consolidates, then she will be better, at least slightly. So f5 is a natural follow-up, and black has really good chances to develop some initiative on the king side. Okay, so let's follow with the Slovak girls, which interest me the most. I've mentioned that I'm their captain in this tournament, and they're playing against Austria. I see already some really wild position on the board, typical for our first board. Simona Bochničková. She's playing against Annika Frövis. And they played the two knights game. Simona played it solid. She was not interested in knight g5. She played d3. Now, if black plays bishop c5, this is the Italian game, the gioco piano, where white can proceed with c3, castles, or knight c3, as we saw in the previous game. Annika played h6, which is slightly unusual, but it prevents knight g5, of course. And at some point, black herself, she can play g5 and bishop g7. And actually this happened in a short while. c3, d6, a4, and now g5. I don't know if this is ideal. I think it's a bit too wild. Queen b3 is a good move, attacking the f7 pawn. Black protects. Now knight a5 is an idea, but this is easily prevented with a5. a6, and white proceeds with her development. Bishop g7, knight f1. And the knight g5 is an active move, but it also weakens some squares. So the knight goes to g3 or e3 and then heads for d5, but also f5. Black castle, knight g3, and now knight e7, covering the vulnerable f5 square. White could have castled here. Instead, she decided to take action with d4. I think this is a bit strange. I mean, it's more logical to first end development. Now knight takes d4, and now black should have taken on e4. Knight e4, knight e4, d5. Instead, she played d5 immediately. I don't like this so much. Knight d5, and now h4. White is one move away from castling, but it's more important to create threats on the king side. c5. Okay, this is anti-positional. This weakens black's position, but she's looking for active counterplay. So knight d2, g4. Castles. This gives white a promising position. Instead, bishop d2. Okay, this is also playable. Queen c6 allows knight h5. Well, now black's only chance at some counterplay is already lashing out with b5. A b6, knight b6. And white took on g7, king g7. This was perhaps slightly premature, this exchange. I think white could have played knight e to f4. Knight c4, bishop c4. This looks stronger. White still can at some point castle even queenside, but she decided to do this. And now black played knight g6. And suddenly black is back in the game. I mean, if in a sharp position you don't find the best continuation, now after knight f4 or something like that, black plays bishop b7, winning a tempo by threatening mate. Already it's not so clear. So here it's an open fight. I think white squandered quite promising advantage. And here it's not clear anymore. So let's check board 2. Here we have Lisa Hapala with white playing against Mravova. This was some Sicilian defense. Let's make the moves on the board. We had this system with bishop d3, bishop c5 in one of the men's games. White played c4 here. going for the Marozzi setup in a different version. Now bishop b4, queen d3 is some sort of theoretical line which is quite dangerous for black. Queen c7 is played more often, and here the usual reaction is bishop a3 to prevent bishop b4. But Liisa Haapala, she does prefer this. Bishop e2, I think bishop b4 is okay. Knight c2, well, here definitely black should take on c3. It's consistent. I mean, bishop c3, bc3, and then d6. I don't have to take knight takes e4, this is dangerous. Then queen d4, bishop comes to a3. But this is a different story. Bishop c3, bc3, knight e4. And if you play bishop a3 now, then I play d6. And the knight can go then, after queen d4, I can play f5. Protecting the knight and protecting g7. So to show you what I'm talking about, this was a play, not queen d4, I want to do something else. No, I didn't want to take, I wanted to play d6, and my idea is d6. Knight, this is dangerous, this is definitely dangerous, knight d4, queen d4. I want to play d6, and if white plays bishop a3, then it's the time to take. And here after queen d4 I can play f5. Okay, bishop h5 robs me of the castling rights, king f8, but it's not so clear. I mean, in black's position, I have the c5 square for the knight, and I have chances to finish my development, so it's not so easy to attack black's king even if it ends in the center. Well, I really don't like this bishop d6, because this just loses time. I mean, and well, now black has no threats in the center. Bishop e3, I can't really afford to take on h2, that's g3, and 3 pawns will not be enough for the dark squared bishop. So bishop e5 and queen d2 simply. b5. Well, if you play like this, try to grab the initiative without developing any pieces, this is calling for trouble. So this should be really good for white. A b5, and now the best move looks to be really knight d4, attacking the b5 pawn, trying to take it as soon as possible, and f3 only after after bishop a6. After bishop a6 I'll play f3, protecting e4. Well, Liisa played f3 instead, and Alena Marova sacrificed a pawn. She didn't hesitate to sacrifice a pawn, which is black's best chance in this position. Still, white has an extra pawn. It should be better for white, but it's already, black's pieces are coordinated. Black has managed to exchange queens, doesn't have to castle, the king stays in the center, and this seems playable for black already. Knight b4, simply knight b6. The queenside pawns are blockaded. I can put my pieces on c4, a4. So let's see the following few moves here. And as usually, Marova is playing quite fast, and Haapala is short of time. Objectively, the position is probably only equal. Bishop f2, king e6. I mean, black has reasonable compensation for the pawn, or even the computer says black is not worse here. And on board 3, we already see white has won a game in 18 moves, and actually Shevchikova, a Slovak girl, has brought us a full point. So how did this happen? Her opponent usually plays the King's Indian, so the Nimzo Indian was definitely a surprise. And Lucy played the line which she prepared for this tournament. Well, d takes c5. Now h6 is okay, but black should play something like knight a6 here. Knight a6 is fine for black. I'm going to take on c5. I will do this even here, but I don't have to worry about black taking on c3. Because now bishop c3, bc3, or queen a5 is bishop takes f6. So black decided to cash in, and white just proceeds with development, and this is a nice position for white. White is slightly better here. Black should try to achieve some sort of hedgehog position. I mean b6, d6, a6, put the bishop on b7. Well, she went for some active play, but it didn't work out well. Queen a5, okay, a3 is a good reaction. d5 immediately. b4, she goes back. And white doesn't release the tension yet. Queen c2. Nice. dc4, rook d1. And now, okay, knight d5 is the right move. White plays bishop g3 and is better. Because I'm going to win the pawn back, and black still has problems developing her bishop. She tried to develop the bishop, but this was calling for trouble. b5. Well, now knight b8 is the only good move here. Knight e5, then knight d5. At least black will be a pawn down, but will not lose a piece. And now this is much more serious. Now knight e5. Well, g5. You were forced to play g5, bishop g3. Seriously weakening the king's side. But she thought this works. Well, it doesn't, in fact. Knight takes d7, and this wins a piece, as after queen d7 white simply plays e4. And well, Qatar, she was disgusted and she resigned at this point. So the Slovak girls are leading 1-0. Let's check port 4. But here they might well equalize, the Austrians. This De Axala is playing against Olivia Sekova. De Axala had an excellent result, excellent tournament here, 5.5 out of 6. Yesterday she lost the game. She lost against Thea Getchi, but she was not really discouraged by this, and she decided to avoid some theoretical fight in an open Sicilian and went for a quiet line with bishop b5. Castles, knight c6. All this is standard theory, I would say. a3, preventing some ideas with bishop b4 and preventing further simplification. White wants to play knight d2, but she doesn't want to exchange too much. Queen d3, rook c8, knight d2. Okay, knight takes d2, bishop takes d2, castles, this is all normal. h4. h6 is fine, and now, okay, young girls have a wild streak in them, and she went for it. Objectively, it's not too good. I mean, f5 or f6 is the right response. ef6, rook f6, and now g5. Well, black should play rook f5. G takes h6, rook c8, rook c to f8. Even if you take on g7, I mean, the position is opening up. Black will be a pawn down, but with all the pieces on the king's side, and white has quite a few weak pawns. It's not so easy to maintain the extra pawn, and not talking about an advantage. Black is doing fine after rook f5. But what happened is hg5. This is not ideal, because now already rook f5, white has knight h4. That's the difference. And the rook won't be able to remain on f5. But Olivia's plan was different. She wanted to sacrifice an exchange, but here queen h5 was an even stronger move, I think, and this leads to big problems, because g6 is creating a mating net. Queen h3 is also quite nasty. Rook f8, g6. Now black managed to prevent mate, but white simplifies into an endgame, being an exchange up, and this is just a bad position. Bishop e7. Okay, now black can play knight g6, bishop f6, king f7, but still, I mean, rook goes to d6, and then gf6, rook takes d5. It's an extra exchange for no compensation. So here white is on the verge of winning the game. So Slovak girls are leading 1-0, but unfortunately for us it will be 1-1 in a short while, I think. Let's go on to the match of the French and German teams. France is white on board 1. Cyrielle Monpeux is playing with Luisa Bashilina. So Emil Negre is not playing in maybe she's left for the end of the tournament. She hasn't played yesterday as well. And here is quite a few moves in a sharp Sicilian. So let's see what went on here. Bashilina likes to play the Najdorf, but here she went for the classical Sicilian. Najdorf is a6, and she played knight c6 instead. Here the main moves are bishop g5, bishop c4, bishop e2, f3, knight d5. This is something I've never ever seen in my life, I must say. It's a pawn sacrifice, but okay, Monpeux must have been prepared for this. Bishop d2, and now knight b5. This disrupts black's coordination a bit, but black can prevent the fork by moving back the queen. Okay, white has a slight lead in development, has more space, but still I don't know if this is sufficient compensation for the pawn. I would play something like e6, bishop e7. Okay, if white plays bishop f4, then I play e5. She played e5 immediately, which I don't think, this is not necessary, I would say. It's necessary to proceed with development. Of course, it's probably not ideal to do so with g6 because of bishop c3, but e6 looks like a safer move. e5, now white doesn't have to lose a tempo. Bishop goes to e3, bishop e7, now queen d2, castles, rook d1. She's still trying to show some compensation. Well, rook d8, black defends the pawn, castles b6, and now f4. White is play for the pawn. I'm not so sure about an advantage, but position is not so clear. Bishop b7, bishop f3, white quietly, slowly, quietly improves her pieces. King h8, now f5 looks good as well, but she played slowly, b3. Black should have probably taken on f4 and after rook f4, f6, but even there, I mean, white has excellent pieces and definitely good compensation. Rook c8, now she did this f5, which cramps black, and f6. This is dangerous. g6 runs into bishop h6, and the problem is taking on f8 and queen h6. White has a mating attack, so white will break apart. The threat is taken on g7, on f7. White will break apart black's king side, and this of course is very dangerous. Rook f3, knight d4, and she proceeds in the attack, already preparing something like queen d3 or so. Knight f5, fg7, knight g7, queen f2 is dangerous, followed by queen h4. Okay, what happened is bishop g5. This is also very strong. The threat is bishop f6 and then queen h6. So black has probably no other move than knight e8. Now queen d3. Threatening mate, f6 is forced, rook f1. all white's pieces are coming to the king side. White is 6 pieces, they're all aiming. The knight comes to e4, rook to f1. White has a very strong attack. I'm not afraid to say the white has a decisive attack. Look at black's pieces, they're all on the 8th or 7th rank. Extremely passive, weakened king side, and most of black's pieces are actually too far away from the king to help effectively. So if Montpellier does it right, she should win the game. So let's see board 2. Butenandt is playing with white against Cornilo, Juliet. This looks like something like the Benko gambit. C4, C5. Okay, and yesterday in the Benko, Bochnichkova with black was successful against the German number 1, Basilina. So perhaps Cornilo was inspired, but Butenandt played a different system. Basilina played e3, Butenandt accepted the gambit. Here g6, bishop g7, these are standard moves. e6 is also possible, but this is a sideline. This is a sideline which doesn't have such a good reputation actually. So let's see what happened here. White made a couple of normal developing moves. Rook a6. She's unwilling to accept the sacrificed exchange. Bishop a6 prevents castling. White can castle with knight g1 and then knight e2. Perhaps it's worth it. I mean, but she was not really interested in this, so she just proceeded with her development. And now already white is ready to take the rook with the castle, with the king castle, so black goes away. b3, bishop g4, breaking the pin. Well, white has an extra pawn. I don't really think black has sufficient compensation. She has some activity. I'm not saying it's simple to convert the pawn, but the advantage is with white. And now she forces some further exchanges. Still promising, more promising for white, definitely. Queens go off. With an extra pawn, this is usually a good idea to simplify. Rook a8, rook ec1. Okay, there's still a lot of fight in the position, but the extra pawn gives white an advantage. Black doesn't have any play against the king or real pressure on the queen side. If she plays something like a rook to a6, I can simply play a4 or a3. So this is a matter of patience and technique, I think, but it could take very long, of course, to convert the extra pawn. But if Butenandt does it well, and Butenandt, she had also 5.5 out of 6, but she lost yesterday, just like Deaxala from Austria. So she's one of the players who have a very good tournament. On board 3 we have the French girl Alfano playing against Michel Truntz, and this is also Sicilian. So let's check it. e6, d4, and this is something which I think I've never seen this before. This is a system which is played after d6. After knight c6, white either retreats to the queen or plays bishop b5. But here it doesn't make so much sense. I mean, I don't really understand it so well because with the pawns on e7 and d6, white's plan could be then knight c3, knight d5, somehow occupy the central outpost, especially if black plays some dragon setup with g6, bishop g7. but here with the pawn on e6, the knight d5 idea is out. So normal developing move is bishop e7, and after knight c3 I can play even d5. I can accept an isolated pawn, actively develop my pieces when queen on e3 is rather exposed. She tried to profit from the exposed queen with b6 and bishop c5. And this is maybe, I'm not so sure about this idea. Queen f4 is a more natural move. White decided to play it more carefully. She went to e2. Well, okay, here the queen is more passive, and the queen also limits the bishop on f1. So queen e2, black played knight e7, bishop e3. Well, still, then another queen move. But still, black's pieces also. The knight is not on f6, it's on e7. I'm not so sure if this is really so good for black. White has the bishop pair here and is doing fine probably. Castles queenside. d5. This I don't like. Well, white should do something else. I mean, bishop d3, maybe h4, ed5, knight d5. Well, it gives black tempi. Knight e7. White decides to keep the bishop, but it loses even more time. So now knight g5 threatens mate. Black can play knight f6. I mean, protecting h7. Position is about equal, but in a few moves, white plays differently. Will get into trouble because rook h1, bishop f1. They're still not playing, and white is trying to create some play with two pieces offside, and this is not a very bright idea usually. Bishop e2, now queen c7. Already there are some threats. Okay, the obvious one is knight takes f4. Rook f1 came, knight f6. And another threat. Rook takes d4 and mate on c2. So here it's getting dangerous for white. She didn't find anything better than knight b5. And now, well, minimum is I can take on d3, knight c7, I retreat to d7, and then I can take the bishop afterwards. I can take the pawn on g2, but she preferred this. She preferred queen c5. This looks attractive, but I'm not so sure about it. Let's think what can happen here. Well, if she sees this, this is playable for white because I have got knight d6 now. White has lost a piece, but this is a double attack, and I'm going to win material back, and it's normal. I mean, if your rook retreats somewhere, I just take on b7, and the rook has to go, but because if you go away with the bishop, I take on c8. I'm winning in exchange. So this queen c5 instead of queen, white can also play bishop e3 with the same idea. Bishop e3 or bishop b4. But she has to see it. I mean, other moves are worse. Queen c3, black's queen goes away. Queen f5, and black is on top. So white has to find this idea, bishop e3 or bishop b4. Let's get on to board 4, where the game has already finished with a mate. The German player Preutigam has mated her opponent in an untypical Sicilian. They played b3, g6. This is actually considered to be a good move. Knight f6, e5, knight d5. And if you play e6, I just play f6. E takes d7, queen takes d7, Black gets to occupy the center, harmoniously develops. This is okay for black. Knight c3 is in fact stronger. Knight takes c3. She took with the pawn. And black played bishop g7. Already this is maybe a slight inaccuracy. Knight c6 is more logical. Knight c6, and after f4 I can play d6. E d6, bishop h6 or something like that. Knight c6, and if c4, then what I'm gonna do is bishop g7 and push in d6, and black is okay. Now queen e2, d6. This is perfect for black. Black is better here. So bishop g7 is a very natural move, but actually it runs into queen d5, and now it's not so simple to get rid of the e5 pawn. Queen c7, okay, f4. Castles, queenside. Still, black should play d6 probably here, even if it's a pawn sacrifice. She played queen c6, and white tightens the pressure, increases it. c4. Useful move. Well, black decides, okay, it's time to develop something. h3. I'm not so sure about h3, of course. No, I'm sorry, she took on c6 simply. D takes c6, and now h3. So both sides have doubled pawns, but white has slightly more space on the king side. But okay, black can get more counterplay with f6. I mean, the queen exchange helps black because now the c8 bishop is already free to enter the game, and with f6, after f6, white's advantage is not so big. She played bishop h6. She's trying to just develop her forces without undermining white's center. Rook h2, a nice way to develop the rook. I mean, the minor pieces, knight g1, bishop f1, they will wait. Okay, now computer says rook e1 is the right move. Rook d2 is perhaps not so accurate, but black didn't react too well here. King f8, so... And now she played king e8. She insists on playing rook d8. But white played g4. Well, white is slightly better here. Bishop g2 is a normal move. She pushes on with g5. Bishop f8. The problem is that bishop g7 is possible, but then later on, not immediately, because it's e6 is bishop b2 with check. But later on, she would have to reckon with the threat e6. So she goes to e6 rather. To f8, I'm sorry, knight g3. Well, white has a space advantage. White is better here. And she lost it really quickly. How did this happen? Rook d8, bishop h3, rook d8, f5. Well, knight f4 is the move to play here. Knight f4, bishop g4 taking on f5, game goes on. White is better maybe, but okay, it's far from clear. And what happened is knight g7, and this is a rather serious mistake. e6. F takes e6, and she took on e6. And this works because after taking on e6 with the bishop, I can exchange on d8 and play bishop g7, which wins the piece. And after knight e6, I will take on d7, and this is a deadly pin. Then something like after king d7, I can play, let's say, bishop e5 and then knight e2, f4. Black can't really unpin his knight on e6. And the bishop on f8 can't move, and my plan is knight e2, knight f4. There is no way to prevent it, so black is going to lose the pinned knight. So that's why what happened is bishop c8. But here already rook e2, and look at black's pieces. I mean, the most active black piece is the knight on g7, which is practically no squares. And the game finished quickly. Black probably could have fought better, but she did this. Knight e4. Okay, now she has to go back. Bishop g4. And knight f5 is a heavy mistake. As you can see, I mean, knight h5 was the right move. Knight h5 with the idea bishop g7. Okay, the game goes on perhaps. White doesn't win immediately, but here white wins immediately, and the game finished with a mate. So, the last match is between Slovenia and the Czech Republic, and on board 1 already the Czech Republic has scored. Joanna Vorek has won against Kejsar, and this was a Sicilian again, so I'll show you the game. And black played the so-called Kalashnikov, not the Sveshnikov. Sveshnikov is with the extra moves knight f6 and knight c3. Kalashnikov. This gives white the extra option to play c4, which is played actually quite often. Bishop e6, now knight c3, a6, knight a3, g6. What I don't know too much about this. Earlier they used to play bishop e7 with the idea bishop g5, but currently this is quite popular. Black puts his bishop on g7, and sometimes this gives him a chance to play knight d4 at some point. Well, white prevents this by controlling the d4 square. Knight f6. Now a sensible move is f3 to prevent knight g4. Bishop d3 perhaps is not ideal. So knight g4 happened. This bishop g7, h3, knight f6, knight d5. Already the black's idea is not only knight d4, I can play something like knight a5, and after b3 I don't yet have b5. The knight on c3 is protected, so it's not so effective. Castling is a normal move, but after castling black plays knight d7, and then I can put the knight to c5, the other knight to d4. Black's pawn structure is perhaps not ideal, but as a compensation he has some piece play. There are quite a lot of lines like this in modern theory. White played knight d5 instead. So the question is, black doesn't really want to take on d5. She would have to take with the bishop, and giving up the light squared bishop is not really something she wants to do. So b4, castles. Castles runs into bishop g5. The pin is definitely unpleasant, so a better idea is to play knight d7 even now. Knight d7, and all these ideas remain with knight c5, knight d4, and so. And knight on d5 is nice, but black sort of plays around this knight. He has some chances to put the knights to c5, d4, to play f5. Okay, the position remains tense, unclear. Perhaps white is slightly better. Castles, bishop g5, this is unpleasant. b5. Now white could have simply castled with an advantage. Instead she took the pawn. A b5, and now castles. Bishop d5, e d5, knight e7. And she's trying to get some counterplay against the d5 pawn. Queen f, knight e3, protecting the pawn. Queen d7. Well, black has unpinned the knights. I mean, this was taking on b5 was not really so good. I mean, castling and letting black take on c4, then white's bishop would be more active to the light squared bishop. Queen f3, and here black can play e4, and this is close to equality, I think. What happens after e4? Let's just take it. Is this possible? Well, I can take and play rook e8, I guess. No, even stronger is f6. f6, g5, f5. I get to kick around white's bishop, and then I will take. Bishop will end somewhere on g3 or h2. This is even better for black. So this is not ideal. White should actually play something like queen f4, and then I can take on d5 or on d3 with a normal position. What happened in the game was knight e8, and this is a serious error. Probably you can spot it. The knight on e7 is protected by the queen, so white gladly plays bishop takes b5 with a tempo. Queen takes b5, bishop b7, nets an exchange. And after queen b7, which is not the best, queen a7 was stronger, but black is a pawn down for almost nothing. Now white has bishop a6. Second deflection, and now already black is forced to take and is going to lose the exchange. So what happened? The final moves were like this: rook c1, knight b5, rook c6, knight c2. This prevents the knight from jumping to d4. Rook d8, queen b3. a4 is the next move. If black doesn't lose her knight, then the queens will get off. White has an extra exchange, two connected passed pawns, completely winning position. So the Czech girls are leading 1-0, and on board 2 we have Beber playing against Rybachkova. Queen's pawn game. White is playing it slowly and quietly. Okay, now black can simply take on c4 and develop her bishop to f5. This is an equal position. Black played bishop e6 instead. Okay, this gives white a chance. Now white controls the center and tries to play with her majority on the queen side. Maybe now white can claim a slight advantage. Following moves will be b4, queen b3. If black tries to play e5, we prevent it with f4. And this is what happened in the game. Bishop f5, and now white played f4. Maybe knight b5 was even more accurate. Knight b5 first. Exchanged, and now she was not too afraid. She gave a check. Black should play e5 now. F e5, queen takes c5. This is not so clear. Instead she played f6, now knight takes d5. Why not? Queen c6, knight e7. Exchange operation, but black's rook is hanging and white has two extra pawns. Okay, it will be only one right now, but threat is g4, rook e8 has been played, and now rook d1. White has a sound extra pawn and very good winning chances here. But okay, she must still show some technique after rook e7. Maybe b4 is stronger, and then b4 and rook a1 or b5 c6 if black doesn't play a6. Rook d1. Still, I mean, white is clearly better here. Board 3, Zadrapova against Maček, and white has a huge advantage here. Material is equal. They played the English opening. a close Sicilian with colors reversed. It's like e4, c5, knight c3, knight c6. Only here black's pawn is on e5. So black is the one who is trying to create some play on the king side. White plays a system which was adopted already by Botvinnik, and maybe even Rubinstein a bit earlier. White sets up a triangle of pawns, c4, d3, e4, limiting black's options. h6. I don't know about h6. I don't know if this is an ideal move. It usually serves to develop the bishop to e6 and not being bothered but by some knight g5 sortie. But here, white doesn't have the knight on f3, so I don't understand the sense of the move. I would play bishop e6 immediately. Knight d5, a6, rook b1, f5, and white plays on the queen side. Black goes for the exchange, bishop e3, g5. f4 looks like a good move here. White decided to take on f5. This almost certainly is not the best because it allows black to develop. He takes f5. Now I can take with the bishop, also taking with the knight. Taking with the knight is maybe stronger. And now f4 already, white has to wait a bit to prepare f4. f4 is not even ideal, but in the follow-up she managed to outplay black. Now e4 is definitely the main move. e4, closing the bishop on the diagonal of the bishop on g2 and attacking the pawn on d5. Knight c3, then queen d7, maybe c6 later on. Okay, this is playable for black. e4, knight c3, queen d7. If white takes on e4, she loses the pawn on d5. If she plays something like queen b3, then I can play bishop h3. What I'm talking about, I'll show you this. This gives black much more concrete counterplay. She played only knight g6, and here white has a superior pawn structure right now. Taking with the pawn is maybe it even allows d6, but it limits black's pieces. I mean, the pawn on e5 will be weak, the bishop on g7 is suffering, white has a nice square on e4. So she took knight takes e5, but here there is a hole, a big hole on e6, and this actually followed up. Bishop e6, d6, queen e6, bishop d5 wins the queen. So white has to do this. Black has to play rook f7, f4. Okay, that's a strong move. gf. Well, rook takes f4 is definitely more logical than bishop f4. Knight d3 takes on g7. This, but still, I mean, white has two bishops, so black decided to get rid of one of the bishops. But still, here black's king is vulnerable. Black's king is more exposed than white's. White is also slightly better pawn structure. Black has this backward pawn on c7. So black tries to defend on the king side, but it's still quite a difficult position. Queen d4 with ideas like g4, and if the rook goes away, then I take on h6. So here it's difficult to somehow control the position, because if the queen goes away to protect f6, then the f5 bishop, the pinned bishop, is hanging. The bishop is not pinned, but the f6 rook is pinned. So I don't see any good defense against this idea g4 rook h6. If you move the bishop, I can take on h6 immediately. So here black is in trouble. And the last game on the last board is a very complicated position from some Caro-Kann. Yaksha against Stara. These are two of the very youngest players here. Yaksha is 10 years old, Astara 13, so they're promising juniors. Knight f3, d5, d3. Well, this is a system which has become popular lately. Exchange on e4 and exchange on queens on d1 leads to quite an interesting endgame in which white can fight for the initiative. So black decides to play a more complex game, but this allows white to play e5, c5, c3, knight c6, and d4. This looks like the advanced French, only instead of e6, black has played g6. Well, on one hand, e6 limits the bishop on c8, but on the other hand, black's position is more solid with the pawn on e6. Bishop. G4, bishop e2, e6. Now b3. Well, knight bd2 is more natural, I would say. Queen b6. Now already there are some threats against the white's pawn chain. Bishop f3, bishop f3, cd4, cd4. Knight e7 looks more logical, I must say. Knight e7 with the idea knight f5. And if white plays g4, then maybe h5. But okay, white can proceed with h3. It's perhaps not so clear. She gave a check. Now white won't be able to castle anymore, but this is maybe not such a major problem. Knight e7 now. g4. Queen c7. a3. She chased away the bishop. And now king g2. Black decided to open the h file, and now black played king d7. Maybe rook h1, queen h1, and then king d7, or castling queenside. Nah, castling queenside is dangerous. b5 could be dangerous then. So king d7, rook a2. Knight e5. She decided to sacrifice a piece to break open the center. Well, it's an interesting idea because white's pieces are rather passive and her king is exposed. So black does have compensation here. Queen e2. Possibly a better move was e4. Knight c6. Rook c2. a6, and now bishop g2. This is the position which is on the board. Well, logical reaction is rook g3. Black has two pawns to the piece, can advance the kingside pawns, f5 and so, and white can't play knight d2 immediately because rook c3 is hanging. Black has compensation. Maybe not an advantage, but still it's an interesting position, and it's not so easy to handle for white, who must defend carefully. Maybe objectively it's equal, but not so simple to play. And black is the side with the initiative. Okay, we have about 6:30, and we will take a break. Hopefully there won't be any more technical problems, and after a few minutes we will try to wrap up the games which have finished meanwhile. So for the time being, stay tuned, and I'll be back in a while. Hello, so we are back after a short technical break and we continue with the men's games. We'll have a look at some games which have finished meanwhile. This is from the match Slovakia 2 against Switzerland, and I think we had it approximately in this position, the game on board 1 between Bogner and Jablonitsky. And as I indicated, white played fg4, locking in the unhappy bishop on h3. Now white took with the queen, rook b6 and f4. Rather wild idea. What's going on here? The bishop is attacked on h3, but black has a chance with rook b2, bishop c1. Well, white still keeps the advantage in some minor complications, but still black should have played bishop g2 at this point. Bishop g2, queen d3, e4. But white's advantage is beyond any doubt still. Rook f4 is pretty much hopeless. Now black is rook down, bishop g2, queen f5, gf4, check. And after queen f8, white can exchange queens and gradually convert the extra exchange. Bishop f8 allows white rook b1, exchanging black's last active piece, and this spells the finish. Now black is practically hopeless because after f3, bishop e4, he has no counterplay. The queen is returning to f5. After queen g7, white played rook b3 first, queen f6. The threat is f2, but this is easy to meet with queen f5. This threatens mate on h7. Black is forced to exchange queens, and after that the f3 pawn simply drops, the b7 pawn drops. So black resigned at this point. Okay, let's check what's going on in the game on board 2 between Turchan and Peng. We left it in a position which I considered about equal, but already black has solved absolutely all his opening problems. After queen d2, black exchanged, played bishop b6, and white didn't find anything better than exchanging the bishop at the cost of his pawn structure. So here black is doing fine, but okay, it's still, white's position is still defensible. He has this outpost for the knight and some potential counterplay on the queen side with a4. Black in fact played a4 himself and white played b3. So black might have a very slight advantage, but white's position still remains solid. And he went for further exchanges, simplifying the position. He's holding his own here. For a while black will be a pawn up, but still it's almost impossible to win this. Black went for the rook endgame, and of course white doesn't go for the pawn endgame, centralizes his king, and a draw is the most logical result here. Rook e8, king f6. I can repeat moves with rook f8 check. So otherwise white will just take the pawn and the material will be equal. So what's going on board 3? Here Pango is playing against Benziger is playing against Pango. We left it at some point like this. We had the move e5. I remember this. Yes. and he played queen d2 and even took on f4, which I don't think, and now black gets his knight on e5, and his position is already rather solid. I would say white's initiative is evaporated here. I can kick out white's queen with rook e6, which happened. So let's follow up what went on. Rook was better on e6 than on d8, because from e6 it could, once the knight goes away, it could attack the e4 pawn. So I don't like this maneuver, rook e6, e8, d8. But still, if white has an advantage, it's very slight. Queen e7, and now rook a7. Okay, this forces rook b8, but still nothing concrete. I'm kicking out the rook, and now I'll manage to defend the pawn. So he prevented bishop g4 with h5. Now white and black played f5 to gain some activity. Well, still, here black's pawns are weaker than white's, and white can try to push. I mean, because after rook d8, this looks like the most natural move. But white can play something like knight a4, knight c8, c5 maybe, creating a passed pawn. This gives him some chances. But the material is very simplified. You have only 3 pieces and 3 pawns on the board. So I'm not so sure if white is better, but I'm not so sure he can convert his advantage. It will be still, it's not so simple. But defending this position is even more unpleasant, I would say. And what's going on here? Oh, there is a long fight from the moment we left the game. We left it at this point. f5, rook c1, and black played rook b8. Rook c8 would have been more accurate, I think. So let's see what went on. And white pushed e4, and here this is different. Without the dark squared bishop, this push is already black doesn't have the dark squared bishop. This push is already promising. White gets a pawn on e5, and also some pressure against c5. Possibly he can push b4. Black prevented this, but the knight may land on d6. Bishop c6. Is this a good move? Well, the engine says white should play, black should play bishop b5 instead. And knight d6, rook d7, that this is better, and then maybe even sacrifice an exchange on d6. Still, the knight is powerful on d6. Knight is really strong on d6, and after rook c7, white's preparing to support it by opening the position with d4. Knight cd8, d4. So this must give white at least some advantage. Okay, black tries to get counterplay. Queen c1. Let's say I'm not so sure about this. Maybe queen d2 would have been better. Knight b5. Black gladly invests a pawn to get rid of the knight on d6. Now queen d7. He has reasonable compensation for the pawn here. Now rook a5 looks like a reasonable move. Instead he went for the break, and this is maybe not ideal. Rook e5, but the engine is not so sure about this. King f7. This doesn't make much sense, because now white can take on g6. I mean, king h7 is a logical move. The bishop is attacked, and once the bishop goes somewhere, then I can take on g5. Let me see this. What happens after bishop d2? Here I can play rook e2. This is a much better version of what happened in the game. I mean, king f7 is a serious mistake because gh6. King g6, bishop d2, rook e2. And now white consolidates his position by chasing away the rook from the second rank. And white is definitely winning chances here. Rook e4, now king f1. And if black plays f4, then white is winning after rook e2. So black has to try to avoid the rook exchange, but still white should, at this point white is 2 pawns up, f4 happened, so I think rook e2 is pretty much winning. Black can still play rook e2, rook d4, but then okay, bishop e1, let's say. And then I give a check on e7 and play rook b7. Excellent winning chances for white. So he should equalize the match score here, and with Turchan against Peng being a draw, the game will be decided on board 3, most probably. Okay, Hungary, Italy, Hungary. Ooh, well, we left this game at a point where I said that black was doing really fine, and this remains very true. Knight c4, okay, black returned. b5 would have been more logical instead of queen f7. Black would have saved some tempo, but even here black has every reason to be satisfied. Bishop d2. Now he can simply castle kingside. Instead he decided to put his king on the other flank, and now he developed his h8 rook. Queen f3 takes, king c7 castles. It's strange, but because now white is okay. I mean, before black had a promising position, he was better slightly, now he's already worse. And white decided to go for some combination here. The pin looks dangerous, but it's not so easy to profit from it. Black, if the need arises, he can simply play b6. So white decided to go for a combination. What is this? Piece sacrifice. And now rook h3, with some ideas like well, a d6, rook d6, bishop c5, rook d1. This doesn't work, so he must do something like this. Okay, queen, maybe b6 runs into d6 and the rook on a8 is hanging, so okay, this is not a good idea. So queen d6, let's say it's fine. And now queen g4, attacking the g pawn. He gives the pawn and plays rook d7. Black is a piece up. Black is a piece up. White doesn't have enough compensation for this. But the fight continues because there are still a lot of pieces on the board. Now e4. Okay, that's a strong move. Preparing queen f4 check at some point. b3. He's trying to get some counterplay. Still not enough. Bishop d5. This was the point when both players were in time trouble. White even more so. And white still, I mean, he's trying to prove that he has something for the sacrificed piece. He's only one pawn. This is more or less a losing position. Queen g7, forcing a queen swap. So black returns one pawn to get into an endgame. And he has every chance to convert his advantage. I mean, while white has 2 pawns for the piece, but still black has 3 pawns left, and white will not be able to exchange all the pawns or something like this to get into a pawnless endgame where the extra piece wouldn't be so decisive. So this gives black excellent chances. Okay, there have been some more moves. Nope, this is the position after a4. Well, black should gradually convert his extra piece. Rook e5 is a very reasonable way to start, then taking on g4. Moroni Pastor, where were we in this game? We were at this point. I was saying something like white has a slight initiative. While this might be true, he didn't manage to convert anything here. And after d6 he took the pawn back, and it all went into an opposite colored bishop's position. Black simply went for simplification. He's prepared to exchange queens. Now rook, bishop g6, rook e7, rook f7. Okay, white is slight pressure, but it's more optical than real. I mean, this is the game is heading for a draw here, and it ended actually a draw. The queen side practically disappears from the board, and now after rook c4 they agree to draw at this point. Okay, and there is another game which also ended a draw. I'm trying to remember what moment did we have here. It was somewhere around here we stopped. Bishop e6. Ah, we had only this position, I think. Bishop g7, castles. Bishop e6, a white played c5. And black went for an exchange operation. Which actually here, white can play queen d4. Which is quite promising. I'm holding on to these c5, e5 pawns, and the bishop on e6 looks a bit funny. This promises white some advantage. The game he played in the move, now white gets white's pawns on the queen side gets split, and white's advantage is smaller, definitely. I don't know about f6. I maybe wouldn't have played f6, but here at least black has some counterplay. Queen takes d4, rook c8. Can he take with the pawn? Isn't that better? Then black takes on f4. Maybe it was a better chance than bishop f3. White is a pawn down, but there are weak pawns on b7, e7, and I have some pressure, so maybe he's going to win the pawn back quickly. But after queen d4, the c5 pawn is vulnerable. Now it's hanging already, so white decided to go for some kingside activity, but it all only led to multiple exchanges, and here of course black is not in real danger. Rook a8, bishop d3. Okay, the threat is taking on h7, but h6. Black is a pawn down, but in case the d5 and a2 pawn disappear, it's almost impossible to win such an endgame. So at this point, actually, bishop b1, black plays d4, and the next move is going to be bishop takes a2, or rook e2. I play something like d3 or bishop c4. So at this point, they agree to draw. And on the last board, we also had a draw. We left it somewhere here when white was still slightly better. But black somehow managed to, he played knight g5. Queen f4 is maybe slightly more promising. Okay, this however didn't happen, and after queen d3, knight g5, black is forcing further exchanges. Okay, his pawn structure is maybe not quite ideal, And here, of course, he should have taken on g7. This allegedly is this leads to problems, because now I can take with the king, which happened, and I can play dc6, and black has to take with the bishop. And both these pawns, b7, a6, are fixated on light squares, so they're a potential weakness. And white has a better bishop, and this better bishop and good bishop, bad bishop thing is most important in bishop endgames, when there are no other pieces left on the board. I mean, here there is no way to trick the opponent that I have one bad bishop but 3 other good pieces. No, here you have only the bad bishop. So white has winning chances here, but he repeated moves simply. He was perhaps satisfied with a draw and didn't want to try to convert his advantage. Well, I don't know if he would have won the game. This is difficult to say. Let's go on to the match between Austria and Slovakia, in which there only 2 games have finished with draws. This was the game between Pechac and Bloberger, and black played it real solid. Here, however, he played knight c6. Oh, black gets here 2 doubled pawns. Rook e1 maybe. I don't know if it's worth it exchanging white's bishop. But Pechac played it. Still, white is the only one who can play for an advantage here. But I would say black's position is possibly defensible. While g3 looks like a logical move here to limit the dark squared bishop. He played f3 instead, and black played f5 and put his bishop on e6. Black grabbed some space on the king side. I see no way for white to make any inroads. I mean, black has these 2 doubled pawns, but how is white going to attack? C6, c7, how is he going to attack? f4, f7. So here the position already looks equal. And white has a weakness of his own on g2. Aha, white's plan is knight c5, then king a3, king a4. Okay, this makes sense. But with a3 the plan is stopped, so knight c5 is a way to try and create some tension. This takes away the square from the king, where the king can try to invade and attack black's pawn weaknesses. b4, rook a8, and black simply holds. I mean, he doesn't exchange anything, he just stays put. Computer remains screaming that white has an advantage here, but of course it doesn't indicate how to increase this advantage. So, and now at this point white actually ran to c5, and black is getting rid of one of the doubled pawns. So now already I think he should be careful. Bishop takes c5. The only one who can play for an advantage is black, because the position opens up for the 2 bishops. But at this point they agree to draw. On the other hand, we had this game Pyrer against Neugebauer, which I also said is pretty much equal here. Black played bishop e6. He didn't play knight b4. He didn't mind this exchange and splitting the pawns. Well, he does get a nice bishop on d5. Although he halved the bishop pair, still black with the strong bishop and play on the queen side. Well, all this will quickly lead to a simplification and a draw. Here everything disappeared from the board. And okay, you have to make 30 moves, but we don't have to look at the rest of the game. So there's only 2 games remaining. It's Dotzer with Sahidi. Sahidi against Dotzer. We had it. Where was the moment we left the game? I'm not too sure. It was rather early here. F4. And I said there's a sharp fight ahead. So let's see what went on. Knight A4. D6, rook D1. So white has decided to play to castle kingside and try to exploit some weaknesses on the queen side. But black does have some counterplay. It's not a given that white has an advantage here. Maybe some slight pressure. B6, A5. I'm not so sure about this. Maybe he should castle simply. And okay, at this point he castled. Yeah. Okay. A4 and knight D2. Bishop E8. Knight DC4 looks like a more active move. Then I can play something like B3. I mean, solidify those knights there. But still, knight F3 leaves open the option to retreat with the knight from B6. Black played H6, E5, D5. Now knight C4. Of course, you can't take the knight because of bishop H7 and rook takes D8, and black's rook on A7 is hanging in the end. So white's winning a queen and black can't even take the rook on D8. So knight C8 instead, knight E3. Position resembles a French defense. I'm not so sure about this F5 move. I don't like it so much. I mean, and now something like C4 or maybe E takes F6 and F5 also to break up the center. Sahidi decided to play a closed game, and here black got some counterplay. He plays actively. Knight D4. Okay, maybe there is some tactical chance. I can take on G5, play bishop F5, EF5, knight D5. Maybe I can play C4. G5 is not without risk. I mean, bishop H5 is a natural move. The bishop is limited by its own pawns. Okay, I'm willing to exchange it. After bishop H5, white's advantage is minimal. G5 is risky. But knight D4 might not be the best way to prove this. Because now, once again, the position is rather closed. Knight G4. Okay, maybe he underestimated this. This gives white still some chances. Knight G8. But no matter what, white is forced to exchange the knight. Should he take on E8? Should he take on G8? In both cases, white's advantage is minimal. He took the bishop. And he's trying to play against black's weak king, but this is not so simple, and black has his counter chances on the king side. He decided to offer a pawn and to get play. G takes F5, knight G4, and queen H5. Suddenly black whips up an attack out of nowhere. So bishop E2 is the right move. Queen G6, no, rook G8. Rook FB1. A good reaction, but still it doesn't completely stop black's counterplay. So this is what happened in the game. There's a queen exchange. Well, a rook endgame with 3 pawns on both sides. This looks pretty much drawish. I can hardly imagine how white is going to win this. I don't see any way to convert this. White can maybe win a pawn if I play E6, rook E4, then I take on D5, F5, but already the position is extremely simplified, and a draw is the most likely result here. Well, here is a big fight on the last board. I mean, the position also looks equal, but we left it at some moment like this, I think. H3. So let's look at what happened here. Black has the bishop pair, but the worse pawn structure, and he tries to get some active piece play here. Okay, he exchanged down some pieces, but black can be satisfied even here. I mean, the bishop is a good piece, and it's not so easy to exploit those doubled pawns. Black is still doing fine here, and even in the endgame. Even in the endgame, black has this pressure on the b file. It's difficult to say how black can play for more than a draw here, because if white does nothing, if white just sits on his hand, so to say, it's almost impossible to indicate some active plan. Black has achieved the maximum, white has no active breaks, but the same goes for black. Any moves like f5 or d5 can only give chances to white. So after a long maneuvering, white got in this push, e5, and he decided to activate. But still, the position remains rather simplified. h3 pawn is well protected. Okay, let me see what happens, let's say, after rook a5 is what has been played. What happens if black tries to attack the h pawn, which seems much more logical. I can simply play knight f2. And then rook h2, rook d2. I don't see any way how black can improve his position. So this is also only equal. Okay, what happened is rook a5. The game will continue. The position is equal, but the game will continue because it's an important game. If Slovaks would somehow win this game, they would win the match. And this would really help them, because in the other match, France against Germany, the Germans have excellent chances of winning. On board 1, we saw the position around here. Rook takes d3 actually happened, and black managed to gradually consolidate his setup and retain his extra material. So let's see how this happened. Castles. Well, there's no clear way. Actually, the engine suggests that at this point white should have taken on e7 and played knight g5, and this prevents kingside castling. Kingside castling runs into queen h7 mate, of course. If black takes on g5, then white has knight d6 check, which is also the king remains in the middle. So bishop e7, bishop e7, knight g5 should give white enough compensation. Knight fd2 is probably already slightly inaccurate. Well, this was white's idea, was opening the king side like this, but here black counterattacks and his pieces are in the right places. I mean, after knight e4 I can play rook g6. I'm hitting on f2. Well, knight e4 happened because knight is headed for g5. But black played rook f8. Knight e5, rook h6. Was knight f5 better? Maybe. Knight f5, knight e5, rook h6, rook h3. There is still quite a lot of tension in the position. Both kings are rather weak. Yes, black has an extra pawn, but it doesn't count for so much yet. Knight e5, rook h6, a4, queen b2. Threatening mate. Okay, black of course protects g7, and now bishop e7. He played knight f3. I'm thinking about how about winning the queen with knight f6 check, but this probably isn't too good, because then I take with the bishop, rook d4, knight d4, and the e5 knight is attacked, and there's the threat of the fork on e2, so the knight can't really retreat. Next move is going to be bishop takes e5, winning material, or knight e2, winning even more material, so knight f3. Black doesn't want to repeat moves, he went to h3. And this already white ruined it, so this was not a bright idea. This knight f3 was probably not very good. Already queen c1. I mean, this is the point where white should simplify the position with knight f6 check. Bishop f6, rook b4, bishop g5, hg5, then he will take somewhere on b7, or after rook h5 I can play f4, and the draw is the most likely result. Queen c1 is a concession. Now the black queen invaded, and black is on top. Here he didn't see anything better than queen c3, but of course black gladly swaps the queens and takes another pawn. Now black is already 2 pawns up. And okay, white's pieces are active, he can pose some technical problems, but still, I mean, black has huge chances to win the game. Here at this point he's even 3 pawns up, and his passed pawns are marching on and on. Okay, white exchanged something, won 1 pawn back, but still, knight c5. Now b6 looks like a very logical move. Also b5 is probably okay, but b6 looks more sensible, chasing the knight to over a square, and then black can advance his pawns. Black is 2 pawns up, close to winning. This is the game which we got to this position straight out of the opening, and black didn't play h6, he played knight f8 immediately, and all this led to some exchanges. Queen takes f6. So white is trying to play in the center, black on the queen side. So let's see how this worked out. b5, e5, b4. And if I take on b4, then queen b6, queen c3, knight e6, I'm going to win the pawn back. That's for sure. So white furthers his own plans. And black as well. f5. Blockade. Knight f3, knight e6. Both sides have passed pawns, but both pawns are blockaded, and the position is equal. White is trying to shift the blockade. Well, instead of a knight, we have a queen there. Queen is the worst blockader, of course, but still, I don't see any really constructive, active plan to gain some advantage here. And what happened actually is both sides exchange all the pieces, and the resulting pawn endgame with the protected passed pawns on both sides is a dead draw. After b5, white can play a3, and simply white's king can't get anywhere because he has to stay in the square of the c4 pawn. The same goes for black's king, which has to guard the e5 pawn. So on board 3 we'll have a long game. I'm not so sure where we were. Yes, this was the open Ruy Lopez, and we stopped here. Black really played queen g6, forcing this exchange, while at this point white still might be slightly better. In the end, black got to excellent counterplay. a4 already is not perhaps the ideal move. I mean, it just loses a tempo. You're not going to achieve anything on a7. I mean, you can't take on b5 and play rook a7 because of bishop c5, and the bishop is going to c5 in any case. A b5, queen e2, d4. Well, I'm not allowing d3, and here with the opposite colored bishops, I mean, black's pawns are also dangerous. The best white can do is somehow try to simplify the position. Black has his play here, and in the end actually black's bishop is the more active one, because white's is limited by the f5 pawn. So finally, white got rid of the c4 pawn, but he lost in a short. He will lose the e5 pawn. He uses this back rank trick. Well, this still should be a draw, of course. Pawn down with opposite colored bishops, but black can try. I mean, black can fight, and they've been playing the game for quite a while already. Black doesn't risk anything here, and white is the one who has to be cautious. I mean, I can imagine the mating net once the pawn advances to g4, and then black plays rook a1. There will be some threats. I mean, rook g1 mate will be a threat, but still, it's not easy even to get a meaningful passed pawn. I mean, even pushing g5 runs simply into bishop takes h5. So draw is a normal result here. This is 50 moves. Well, they will play on because the game is important. But once Doyer on board 1 wins, the German player can clearly agree to a draw, because on board 4 the game was drawn. We had it at this point, and I said that bishop f4 was very much forced, which happened also. And I mean, this is a solid position, and it ended in a draw after a couple of moves. Black simply, now they repeated moves, yes. Well, I mean, if white doesn't play rook e2, then black can move his knight somewhere to b7, to f7, exchange the rooks, and the knight endgame can hardly be anything else but equal. So let's look at the match Czech Republic against Slovenia, where the Czechs are dominating, absolutely. They won the match 4-0 already, as I see. And we had this position where I suggested b5. Well, black, after some thought, he decided to take on c3. And I said, here, white has comfortable position because he has 2 bishops and mobile pawn center. This is simply better for white. e4, c4, maybe knight b6 is better, but okay, he wants to get an outpost for the knight. Rook a2, castles. Still white is better here. He protected his c3 pawn and now starts playing on the opposite side. Well, here it's not clear at all. I mean, rook d8, it could rook d8. I've underestimated black's position quite a lot. I mean, here it's Finek played it in a risky fashion, but his opponent somehow lost the thread here. The problem is white's rook on a2. The rook on a2 can't really enter properly. I mean, rook b2 runs into something like knight a4 or so. And with this, black has always counter chances. And the problems came only after finally white managed to activate his rook. Okay, this happened. Now black played g6, which is weakening. g4 is now the best move. Queen f2 instead. And queen e7 is difficult to understand. I mean, rook a4, knight a4 is a logical reaction, and the white must do something with the c3 pawn. But he started defending on the king side, and this is not a bright idea. I mean, h4, rook b2, queen f3, and suddenly it's white who is on top. And now even the end game is very good, because now now white's going to win a piece. So he sacrificed it but only for a single passed pawn, and this is not enough, of course. Bishop b4 was the last move. after king somewhere, white plays bishop e4 and simply wins the knight with 2 extra pieces. No, I've been too optimistic. This is the game on board 2, Goroshkov against Nemets, and I said white was better when we left it, and he managed to win the game, so it's not 4-0. I'm sorry. Knight bd2. Actually, the engine says this is inaccurate. White should play queen e4, then queen h4, and then knight d2, knight e4, etc. What happened is knight bd2, h6, bishop h4, bishop e7, and now he didn't see anything better than taking this nasty knight. And black took with the bishop, and this leaves the e4 square for the knight open, so he should have taken with the pawn. This is stronger. Bishop d5, c4 first. Okay, black exchanged, but still here white has pressure. a5, g5, queen b8, h4. Black's in trouble. g4, knight d4. This happened, knight d4, and now the pawn is hanging, and there is a fork on c6, obviously. So white is winning material. Black has to protect the c6 square. Okay, he has some tactics to exchange a few pieces, but still white has an extra pawn, and black's king side is weak. So rook f8 was maybe better. Rook b8 is what happened. King h2 goes to safety. Queen e1, black goes for a counterattack. Rook g4. He should have played rook g4, and after rook b1, bishop f4. I'm freeing a square for the king, and I'm threatening to take on h6. Queen f1. Allegedly, a better chance is queen a1. And then play rook b1, and the rook will be in front of the queen. Here it's just, once again, this is nothing. Queen h1, it only decentralizes the queen, and here it is pretty much lost. Queen e1 happened, and with the idea bishop h6, queen e5, but white played queen e3, and this is deadly. Because now queen f6 is a decisive threat, and black can't really defend. King f8 is rook a8, so after bishop e3, black had to resign. Okay, this is board 3 with Gnoyek playing with white. h4, rook d8. I suggested taking on c4, but he continued differently. a3, and he wants to keep the bishop. Okay, queen c2 now looks logical. Instead, white went to a2, which is sort of a strange square. It's bishop e2 and e5. Well, this is not good, because now white has b4. b4 and ed4, knight d5. This doesn't work. The tactics don't work. And black is losing material here. Queen f5, knight takes d4, and taking on d4 is a fork on e7. Knight d4, knight e7 wins material. So he took on d5, and here the problem is white threatens to take the bishop, and there is also a fork on e7. So after 21 moves, it was game over, and a win for the Czech player Gnoyek. And Micha, Skrbec against Micha. Where did we have this game? At this point, yes, and I said that taking with the rook was not ideal. c6. Here I said black is doing fine, and he managed to win the game. Bishop f5 is already, he's forced to defend the d3 pawn. a5, solidifying the knight on c5, and now black proceeds somehow to improve his pieces. Bishop d6, the queen comes to f6, connecting the rooks. Okay, now he hits d3 again. Bishop a3. Simply c5. Knight d8. Black has time here. I mean, look at white's pieces. Rook a1, bishop c1, knight c2. How can they hurt black? h5. And he played actually bishop g4. Well, even queen g4 is possible with a better position. White didn't exchange queens. He's trying to create some counterplay. Now bishop e2 is a suggestion. After bishop e2, black can avoid the exchange. Bishop d7, he's better, but only slightly so. He has more space. Okay, it's pleasant for black, but nothing more than that. And bishop g2 leads to problems, because now the queen on d5 is exposed. Bishop a3, rook d8. And already bishop e7 is a threat. I mean, this almost traps the queen. Bishop c5. Bishop takes g3. Bishop b7. Bishop g3 was a threat, and white thought that he can get away with a queen sacrifice like this. But still, I mean, even if he takes on f8, bishop takes f8, king takes f8, white's king is exposed and weakened, and the queen is stronger than the two rooks. Well, he tried to an intermediate move. He inserted rook f1, and now rook ae1 is the best defense. Instead, rook f4, and now simply bishop h3. Well, simply, it's a nice move, because now white can't really protect the g3 pawn. King h2 runs into knight g4 check, for example. So he played like this, protected g2, but here white's position is already falling apart. Black is prepared to take on g2 and play knight g4, something like that. Knight g4 immediately. White has to give the exchange. Black has an extra queen, and now he's netting himself another pawn. Now queen g3 is the best move. He played queen e3, slightly weaker, but still enough. I mean, well, now rook f3. You should have tried to play rook f3, d6. Well, the pawn won't be a queen, so this is losing simply. One check and king e7. White's ideas are stopped, and after rook d1, queen d1 is game over. Resigned at this point. So in the match, Slovakia against Germany, there we already have 4 draws, I think, if I see it correctly. And Doyer won his game with black. He managed to convert these two extra pawns. In the end, he had 3 extra pawns, and he simply queened one of the passed pawns. White resigned at this point. So the Germans are leading, and they're playing the last game in which they are pawn up, so they will win the match. And once this happens and Slovakia doesn't win their match against whom are they playing today? Against Austria, then the Germans will be in first place before the last round. This is the position in Docer Sahidi. This is the last remaining game. The other game, Druska, Balint against Druska, ended a draw already. Well, this also looks like a draw. I mean, if you can take on e5, you can take on a4. White has an extra pawn, but it's not enough to win. Okay, let's check the ladies. As far as I saw it, Switzerland has already won the Mitropa Cup, because they had a 3-point lead, and they have won another match, so they have at least 3 points. They are at least 3 points ahead of the other teams. They have right now 15 points, and nobody can catch them anymore. So what we saw here, Manko won against Medic. I think we saw it at some point like this. Yes. Now she played knight d4. White still holds on to a sizable advantage, and she managed to convert it. Now the pawn drops. Another pawn. And this is pretty much hopeless for black. e5. King f7, rook d7, king g8. Knight goes to e4, and threatening knight f6. Black resigned at this point. Well, 2 pawns down without any counterplay. This is enough. They didn't win 4-0, but they won also on board 2. Where we had this piece sacrifice. We had this position, but it was really not enough. As I said, I don't see any way to improve the position. Rook d7. Black could have taken on f3. Queen c6 came instead, which is perhaps inaccurate. And white can take. White should have taken on a7. Queen g6, queen g4. Okay, 2 pawns. Even in an endgame, it's not so easy to untangle black's pieces, and white has these 2 connected passed pawns. But she played bishop g3, queen e6. Once again, exchanging queens was better. But Berke insisted on retaining the queen and didn't even win the a pawn. And black gradually activated all her pieces. Rook is out. Bishop gets out, and now rook takes g3, decides the game. Queen h5, queen g2 is the final position. Next move is queen takes f2, rook g1 mate. So in the end, black converted the extra piece and won with an attack. Well, we stopped somewhere here, and I said that black didn't take the pawn on b4, and now she is suffering a bit. Bishop e3. I don't know if this is so dangerous. Well, still, white has somewhat more space. Maybe it's not so dangerous, but somehow black didn't play too well in the end. Here it looks strange. White's pieces. Now I can play something like d5 maybe. d5, bishop d5, bishop f5. This would be excellent for black. But instead she took. Rook b8, rook e1. White's bishop is stronger than the knight. She should have taken with the pawn, f pawn on e5. She took with the d pawn, bishop b3, c6. This is maybe slightly better for white, but once again, it's not so much, and in the end, black got outplayed. Well, queen b4 is a heavy mistake. In a position which is promising for white, but definitely queen d8, queen b4 runs into queen d8, and now queen f8, queen takes b6, loses a piece. Rook d8 is mate. So this is how the game on board 3 finished. And on the last board, Croatia at least scored. So the score was not so one-sided. Yeah, we had some position like this, and white converted her better pawn structure in the end. Okay, this is slightly better for white, but maybe still not so bad. But she started playing, I think, on the wrong side. Well, okay, h4 is still not such a problem. Knight e6, f4. She played queen d6, f4 anyway, f6. fg6 is nothing much, and she made a mistake. This is definitely not a good move, because now white can exchange queens, and she can protect the g6 pawn. Black can simply take on g6 or play something like b6, c5 and take on g6. No, this is an unclear position, but this is a serious blunder. Now white has a passed extra pawn, and the g3 pawn will get lost sooner or later, so this is what decided the game. And now white invades, bishop d5, and it's game over. Discover check, the g pawn queens. Well, we had this game, this was the Russian game with knight takes e5, knight takes e4. We were somewhere at this point. Let's get back a few moves. As I said, black played g5 after rook d4 and is doing quite fine. There's no advantage left. And she... Now it's opposite colored bishops and it's all heading for a draw. Here it's already pretty clear that white has nothing. And here they agree to draw. As I see, Zimina did win in the end. Oh, I'm sorry, this is Sedina. No, Sedina, Zimina. I won Zimina's game against Zsuzsana Terbe. So Italy were leading. We had this position. And I said, white missed her chance to play e5. And here already black was getting back into the game. Although it's still slightly better for white, but it's not such a big deal. She pushed e5 and now bishop b5. Black is already, her pieces are coordinating, playing, and there's enough counterplay. Queen a7, threatening c4, discovered check. c4 came anyway. Knight d6. Well, white still has some pressure. Now, knight f6. What was this? I don't understand. I mean, can't I? Aha, taking the knight is queen g3 check. But knight e7 is a strong move. King f8, king g2. And if you go to g7, of course, g5 wins the knight. So this was really powerful. Instead she played king g2, queen f4, knight e7. Now king g7 is now pretty much forced. White doesn't have g5 anymore. King f8, and now white has knight f5. Knight f5 is the right move. Knight f5, and the knight is attacked on f6. Black can't take. Black must play rook a6. But this was obviously in time trouble. They were both short of time, and there were many heavy mistakes. Queen b4 is king g7. Already black is very much okay here. Queen c3, and now not repetition, now rook a1. Rook f2, queen e4. And now, well, white is more or less forced to play rook f3, and after queen e7, g5. But she played king g3, and this led to mate. And Italy has also won on the last board. So Hungary has lost the match, as far as I can see. Okay, we had this position, king f1, and she really pushed f5. This was the moment when we left the game, and I said this is promising for black. f4. Now knight f6 looks the most logical to free the way for the f and the g pawn. She played rook f8 instead. Knight f3 is perhaps not ideal. Maybe bishop a4. This was the idea. I mean, to attack the c6 knight and then put some pressure on the e5 pawn. Okay, she's trying to do the same, but here black somehow gets out of it. Knight e5, fg3, g5. Well, still, white has won a pawn, but knight g4 is a mistake. Knight g6. The threat is knight f4 check, king h2, bishop g4. Knight takes g3 is possible. How is it possible? I'm curious. King g3, h5. And then I play knight f4 and g4. If knight e3, for example, knight f4, g4. Black sacrifices a piece, but has a very powerful attack. Well, she took and played knight f6. Okay, still attacking chances, but here it's far from clear. And there were mutual mistakes in the final phase of the game. d4 is the right move, because rook g1 runs into knight e5. Knight takes e5, rook f2 check. Wins material, but still white should have sacrificed the queen, and this gives perhaps some chances to fight on. This just loses. Knight f3, rook f3, bishop e6 takes on g4, rook f2. This is pretty much hopeless. Queen e3, and now h5 leads to mate. g4, bishop g4 is rook h8, and king h4 is rook h2. So game over. g4 resigns. So the Italian girls have won their match against Hungary, and the Slovakian girls won their match as well against Austria. Let's check the final phase of this game. We left it at this moment, knight f4. Here bishop b7, I mentioned, is the best move, which forces f3, then rook d8. Black has a lot of piece play. She instead took on h4, knight c4. Now bishop g7 and rook e7. Now allegedly black should have taken on g2. Knight e6 check, king h8 with some tactics and an equal endgame. King g8, simply queen e2 is a powerful move. Queen e2 attacking the g4 pawn. Rook a5 instead is not really good. Now black should have gone to d8, instead rook c8. This doesn't make much sense. Well, once again, queen e2, h5, queen e5 is powerful. b4. Finally knight g2, but not at a good moment. Knight e3. Knight c4, and now rook b7. Here white is better. Here white is better, and some move like king g2 gives winning chances. Rook b6, the problem is g3. Now black gets rid of the pawns, and already from black's point of view it's an easy draw. The thing is that at this point Slovakia was leading 2-1 in the match, and the Austrian girls needed to win this game, and this is already not really possible here. Bishop d4, and now with a 2-1 lead, of course, there is no need to complicate matters further, and white went for a repetition, which guaranteed a win. But how did they win? Let us check. Well, we left this game at this point, and there I said Haapala was already running short of time. Bishop e1, knight d6. Okay, the position remains equal because black has compensation. Knight b5, and now rook c1 or something like that is normal. Knight f2 is what happened, and she ran into a knight fork in a critical moment. She had only 3 minutes left, and of course losing an exchange is decisive. King d1, well, the king is badly placed here. Rook b2. So black has won an exchange and has a rook on the second, and she converted her advantage convincingly, I hope. g5, knight e5, and this is more or less a technical win. White shouldn't move the pawns at all, and this only helps, of course. King f4, now the king invades, and the f-pawn queen, so this is hopeless. They made some more moves, but it's unplayable already. Already white lost her last pawn, and the f-pawn will promote. So this is the final position. And as I said in the last game, unfortunately, black at this moment she didn't play the right move, which is rook f5. Actually, interesting is taking with the bishop on f6 and playing after g5, playing e5 with the idea of giving queen g4 check. E4 is an idea. This is even stronger than rook takes f6. But okay, it was a missed chance, and now already it's the other way around. And white, we already saw this position, and it didn't last too long after bishop e7. Takes, knight f4, king f7 is the way, but here it's even worse. Rook takes f6, knight d3, rook g1, and rook f3, and white is mating on the h file. So let's finish the last two matches. This is Germany against France, and this is the only match where there is still some tension, because we on the first board, Montpeux against Bashilina. We had this position where white is virtually winning. Rook f1, f6, and now she played bishop h6, which is not ideal, because here somehow black gets to breathe again. If white has an advantage, it's certainly most of the advantage is gone. But b5 once again is not good. Why can't I take with the queen? Because I exchange the queens, and then she loses her bishop on b7. And after knight g7, the threat is queen f8 with mate. Bishop d5, knight d5 is hopeless as well. Bishop d5, knight d5, queen d8, queen h6, threatening knight f6. Queen f8, and she decided to force the win of the queen, which is sufficient to win as well. Actually, black resigned here at this point. Okay, this is in this game the German girl had an extra pawn, but she then didn't manage to convert it. We stopped looking at it somewhere here, and Kornilov defended valiantly and managed to create and managed to hold the game. So now black is still a pawn up, but it's all geared up to a rook endgame with an extra pawn on one flank. And this is almost impossible to win. The question is, does white have some chances here? Well, she does, because she has these advanced pawns. Even 4 against 3 would give her chances. And actually at this point she does have good chances to win. Rook e4, I don't like this move. The king is cut off, and why is she playing this? I mean, rook c4 and then b5. Rook e4, g6. Takes, suddenly black has counterplay. And already the position is equal, and this is impossible to convert. Draw at this point. Well, of course, rook b8, rook b4, king e5. Black has enough play on the king side. And the last game that is being played is this endgame. Alfano is white, Trunz is black. Well, white has a better endgame, a clearly better endgame, but still, I mean, both players have about 3-4 minutes, a tough struggle. So this game will decide the match. If it's drawn, then it's 2-2, because on the last board, we saw this already. We saw this game to the end. On the last board, Bräutigam won. She mated her opponent. The Czechs managed to win the match against Slovenia. I think we saw all the relevant games already here. And there's the last game is being played, in which the Slovenian girl is 2 pawns up. So she will, but they will have only 1.5 points. I'm sorry. The Czech games, the Czech girls have 2 points, and it's 2-0 at this point. There is the 4th game is being played as well. So this will be 2-1. And what does it look like in the 4th game? Well, this was a totally crazy game. We left it at some point here when I said slightly later. I said something like black has excellent compensation after rook g3. White played b5, and knight d4 is very strong, of course, utilizing the pin. d4. Now white should take on f3. Instead she took with the rook on e3, and black of course took the knight. Black is now 3 pawns up, but rook, knight d4, queen d2, rook g4, rook d3. So now the simplest way, of course, is to play e5, because after bishop h3, queen g1 is mate. But she played queen b6 instead, and this is suddenly unclear, because the rook is attacked and all black's pieces are pinned. So here white wants some material, and the game is still continuing, and it's pretty unclear. Queen takes d4 is a draw, but black wanted more than that. And here white has an extra piece. The pawns are not so far, so white is better already. Here we could draw again by perpetual. Black doesn't want them perpetual. She wants to win, although she's worse. A really crazy game. The match may yet well end 2-2. Okay, so this is the current position. Well, black definitely shouldn't lose this. I mean, after rook e3, I'm going to play rook b5, protecting the b7 pawn. I have 3 pawns for the piece. A draw is a normal result. King f3 is also possible, of course. The game continues. Okie dokie. Last check of the man's games, and then we say goodbye till tomorrow. What happened here? I will just report the results. So in the end, the Tachnik didn't manage to convert his advantage, and he only drew the game. And Benziger won against Pango, so the match ended 3-1. Switzerland won against Slovakia 3-1. Italy against Hungary is 1.5, and there is the last game being played is Sonis against Bodrogi, where black had an extra piece, but already he didn't manage to convert his advantage, and this is also heading for a draw. Here already white is these strong 2-passed pawns. The most logical result here is a draw. So let's come on with the checking. I want to see all matches. Slovakia against Austria also looks very clearly like 2-2. I don't see any chance there for anybody to break. I mean, this is just an equal end game, because even if white wins the f4 pawn, he can't convert the g pawn. So this is a draw. The match will end 2-2, and Germany will win their match. That's pretty much sure, because there is this last game being played. They're leading 2-1, and in the last game the German player has an extra pawn, which he probably can't convert, but still. And Czechs have beaten Slovenia 3-1. As we said, we already had this result. So, and what else do we have to sum up? No, that's about it. That's about it. So before the last round, the Germans will be in the lead, followed by Slovakia and the Czech Republic. But still there is tension in the fight for victory. While in the women's competition, already Swiss have guaranteed first place, and there's the fight is only for the following the second, third, fourth place. There is France, and France have won their match. No, they haven't won it yet. France are in the front. Hungary and Hungary have the same number of points as Slovakia, 8. So France and Italy are behind the Swiss, but already can't catch them anymore. So there is still quite an exciting last round in the men's competition, and in the women's competition it will be only all about the second, third and the following places, with Switzerland being the winner. So that's enough for today, and I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Tomorrow the round is played in the morning, and we start streaming at 10:30 a.m. So goodbye and see you later.